Okay, everybody. Today we are continuing imaginary slash complex numbers, and today we're going to cover two things. We're going to cover adding complex numbers, and we're going to cover subtracting complex numbers. Now, the great thing about these two, actually there's three, but today we're only covering adding and subtracting. The great thing about adding and subtracting complex numbers is that we can treat the I just like it's a regular variable, and then we can just combine like terms, okay? So the first one we're going to tackle here is adding complex numbers. So whenever you have a parentheses, you have to look what's outside the parentheses to see if there's anything there that's going to affect everything inside the parentheses. So in this case, there is nothing outside this first parentheses here. There's nothing to distribute. So everything inside these two sets of parentheses is going to stay the same. So -7 plus 10i. Okay. Now here is a plus. Now technically there's a 1, invisible 1 in front of this parentheses. So when you multiply it, where you distribute 1 inside the parentheses, 1 times anything is anything, right? 1 times 6 is 6, 1 times 7 is 7. So pretty much the idea is that if there's no number here or no negative number, whatever's inside the parentheses doesn't change. Technically, we're multiplying by 1, but when you multiply by 1, the number doesn't change itself. So technically, these two stay the same. So it's -4 and -5i. Just like that. Now, what I like to do is I like to add the vertical way. To me, that was the easiest, and we learned that in elementary school. Now, vertical means up and down, right? So if I take these first two numbers and I write them here, these first two terms exactly, I'm sorry, and we say -7 plus 2i. Now look at these two, okay? We're going to put these two under here. So let's take them one at a time. This -4, where would this -4 go? Would it go under the 7, -7, or under the 10i? Well, since it's just a regular number, with no I, I'm going to put it under the 7. I'm going to say -4. And you see this -5i here? Well, it has an I, so I'm going to put it under this 10i. And I'm going to say that. So now I can add just like I did before. So these two are the same signs. So I add them. 7 and 4 is 11. 7 is my bigger integer and 7 is a negative, so my 11 is negative. 10i and -5. 10 and -5 are different signs, so I'm going to subtract. 10 minus 5 is 5i. And since 10 is bigger and 10 is positive, the answer is going to be positive as well. So there we go. There's my final answer. -11 plus 5i. So that's pretty much adding complex numbers, right? Subtracting is a little different, okay? So again, I have to look to see what's in front of the parentheses. In this case here, there's nothing in front of the parentheses, so everything inside the parentheses simply comes down just like that. Now here is a minus sign. So a minus sign also can work as a -1. So pretend there's a -1 here. So whenever you multiply something by a -1, it makes whatever you're multiplying by the opposite. So if you multiply a -1 times a +2, it becomes a -2. It becomes the opposite. If you multiply a -1 times a +145, it becomes a -145. Well, same thing happens the opposite with negatives. If you multiply a -1 times a -27, it becomes a positive 27. So pretty much what you're doing is when you have a negative here, everything inside the parentheses becomes the opposite sign. So this 3 becomes a -3, and this positive 3i becomes a negative 3i. So just like I did up here, I'm going to take my first two terms here, and I'm going to say -5 minus 6i. And then I'm going to take these two and put them under here. -3 would go under the -5. -3i would go under the -6i, just like that. So now I can combine like terms. -5 and -3 are the same signs, so I add 5 and 3 is 8. 5 is bigger and 5 is a negative, so I have a -8. -6 and -3, they're the same sign, so I add them. 6 and 3 is 9i, and 6 is bigger, and 6 is a negative, so my solution is going to be negative as well. And that is my solution right there. Okay? So next time, next notes, we will deal with multiplying complex numbers, monkey face. But for today, we're just going to cover adding complex numbers and subtracting complex numbers. Next, we're going to do some examples of what the problems look like on Delta Math. Off here with adding complex numbers, where we just simply bring down, right, both everything that's inside the parentheses without the parentheses now when we bring it down, right? And they don't change because there's nothing on the outside that's going to change what's inside the parentheses. That's adding complex numbers. Now, when we're subtracting complex numbers, we have to take into account that there's a negative here out in a minus sign, which also counts as a negative. So when you distribute this negative, everything inside becomes the opposite. So the 3 became a -3, and the plus 3i became a minus 3i. And then we also reviewed that it's easier, or I find it easier, I'm not sure if you do, that if when we add, we combine like terms vertically, just like we learned in elementary school. So the -4 and -7 went on top of each other, and positive 10i and -5i were on top of each other there, and then we were able to reduce. Same here, -5 and -3, and -6i and -3i, right? So we're going to use those same strategies here with these examples for these examples from Delta Math. So the questions are going to say, simplify the expression to an a plus bi form. So simply what that means is that we understood that in the previous assignment, that a means a number with no letter, no I, goes first, plus bi, that means a number with the letter, goes second in your final solution, right? So here we have our 1 minus 6i. So when we have nothing out front here, we can simply take out everything that's inside the parentheses, and we can drop the parentheses, no more parentheses. So when there's a plus here and there's no number here, there's an invisible 1 technically, right? The parentheses drop and we just bring everything down, just like that. Now, if there was a number here like a 2, then we do distribute the 2, right? 2 times 12, 2 times I. Or if there's an I there, you would distribute the I, but in this case, there's nothing there. So, just like in the notes, let's stack them vertically, right? So I'm going to say 1 minus 6i first. 1 minus 6i. And then I have 12 plus I. So I have 12 plus. Now to help me out, to help me remember, I'm going to remember that in front of this I here is an invisible 1. So I'm going to say plus 1i, just like that. So now I'm going to combine like terms. So this is a positive 1 and a positive 12. So same sign, so I add them. 12 and 1 is 13. Okay. And these two I have different signs, negative 6 and positive 1. So I subtract. 6 minus 1 is 5. And then I. Now, since 6 is bigger and 6 is a negative, then my answer is going to be negative. And that is my final solution. And I have it in A plus BI form. A plus BI. There you go. That's an example of adding complex numbers. Now, the next example here is subtracting complex numbers because there's a minus in the middle, right? So just like the above example here, there's no number or sign here that's going to change these two. So these two simply come down just like that. Now here it says minus. Now even though there's no number here or there's no visible number, right? Like I said here, if there was a 12, you would distribute the 12. Technically, there's an invisible 1. So you're technically distributing negative 1, right? But remember, when you multiply by a negative, everything becomes the opposite. So this negative is going to make this 9, positive 9. There's no number in front of it. A minus 9. And this minus 5i is going to become a plus 5i. Now, we can do what we did when we can stack them vertically, right? So I take my first two here, negative 11 plus 8i. And I have my negative 9, which is going to go under the negative 11, plus 5i is going to go under the plus 8i. And now I can combine my like terms. 11 and 9, well, they're the same sign, so I know I have to add them. So 11 and 9 is 20. And 11 is my bigger integer, and it's a negative, so I know my solution is going to be negative as well. And here, again, also same signs, they're both positive, so I'm going to add them. 8 and 5 is 13i. And 8 is my bigger integer, and 8 is a positive, so my answer is going to be a positive as well. And that is my final solution for that one. So as you can see, just like in the examples, it's very clear, it's very straightforward. The only thing you have to worry about is watch for that plus or minus, right? And whenever you have a minus, the 2 or 3, it might be a parentheses with 3 terms, inside all become the opposite sign, okay? Now, if you're used to combining like terms horizontally this way, right? Circling the like terms, that's fine as well. I just wanted to introduce something that you're familiar with as far as the vertical combining like terms. All right. If there are any questions, please let me know. But if not, then you're all set to go.